Welcome to Love in Brief, a brief ABDL podcast focused on issues of love. Love for self,
Yep.
love for community,
Yep.
love for friendship, partners, all sorts of love. I'm Teddy, your co-host for today.
And I am Resonant Yes. And one of the ways that we do love, that I love the best, is getting to know and love yourself. And Teddy, boy, do you have a topic for us today.
Yes, I think that love for self, we're going to hit pretty heavy today. So it's about, our episode today is going to be about finding resources and seeking out support as an ABDL, regardless of what phase of your kink journey you're in. Maybe you're at the point where you've been doing this for years and you're like, yeah, this is a great part of myself. Or maybe you're at the very early stages where like, I have this deep, dark secret that nobody can ever know about. I think we'll have a little bit of advice for everybody today, no matter where you are.
For sure. And some folks, I know I've talked with folks who have been like in that deep, dark secret place for 25, 30, 35 years and are ready to consider maybe there is a next phase. Maybe there's another stage with me and my kink. So I think today's episode is for them as well.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. I get messages, quite often of people in their, 40s, 50s that are just like, I'm finally coming out of this, and getting messages from the podcast listeners like this has helped us. So, the podcast is one resource that we'll talk about today.
Sure.
But, really, I wanted to first go ahead and introduce our guest today. Our guest today actually is going to be a familiar voice to some listeners who have been with us for the long haul. Back in episode 107, that's the
40 episodes ago.
40 episodes ago.
Wow.
I think it was late 2023. So we're talking a couple of years now. The Plus One support group episode, definitely worth a listen or a re-listen. Maybe you want to pause here and go give that a listen. But our guest today is a returning guest from that episode. Their name is Marissa Cope, and I will let them introduce themselves, but they are very busy in the community and in their own practice. Again, from that episode 107, they have been running the Plus One support group for now years, the ABDL support group in person for years. They can talk all about that. So I guess first question for you, Marissa, tell us about your love.
Hi, thanks so much for having me on. I'm so excited to be here again after all of these months in between the last time I was here before, and lots of updates from that as well. I was thinking about, as I was prepping for the podcast, what my love might be right now. And it really stood out to me that my love right now is just for love of tenderness. Like it's been a hard time for a lot of folks in my life and hard time for me in different ways. And like really leaning into that like tenderness, that sweetness, that softness that we, when we are able to do that. I'm right now in a cabin in the woods, taking a little vacation and just really leaning into that tenderness too, and excited to bring that tenderness to this discussion.
Oh, it's so good. I can just feel this like a little warmth in my chest when you talk about tenderness. And sometimes we're most tender when things are the hardest, right? It's one of those weird benefits of hard times. And I love that you're reinforcing, like, we can be tender kind of whenever we need to. So thank you for bringing that.
Yeah, not only tender, but also tough, but they often go hand in hand.
That's right. That's
true. Yeah, I love that call to tenderness. I mean, I've been in myself, in a tough place these last months, these last years. I mean, of course, what's going on in the broader world. And I think when I can kind of retreat to that space of tenderness, within myself, giving myself some grace, and then in my own, dynamic with Toki, I mean, if we can find this cozy space together to retreat. We recently went out into nature too and found that, and it's so restorative. And I think if people are struggling right now, that is a good place to go to if you possibly can. Just take a break from it all and recenter yourself.
That is one form of sort of self-love and support, which is something we're going to get into a lot today. I'm so glad that this came up. And by the way, Teddy, I've been following your retreats into nature in the last couple of weeks. And if you get a chance to follow Teddy, it's so worth it on the socials because Teddy will post the most amazing pictures of being out in nature. So I've been in a super busy time at work and I just retreat to your photos for like 30 seconds at a time. It's so wonderful. You are a support to me as you go out in the world. So thank you for that.
I'm glad I can help create that space for you, RY. But I do hope you can get out there yourself soon too. And I know you and I both have a trip coming up very, very shortly here to go see some friends, and they're actually going to be getting married. They met in the community, so there's some more of that love of partners, love of community. They met through the community, but yeah, we'll be able to go and take a little bit of a break from our lives to go see them, celebrate them, and see some beautiful places along the way.
Yep. I can't wait. And I want to get into support. I brought this up obviously as the topic, but there are ways that we kind of reinforce support in the podcast all the time. Little ways that you can support your partner and you can support yourself. But sometimes you need resources, or you want resources from outside of yourself for support. And Marissa happens to be an expert on this topic. And Marissa, you've done so many wonderful things. I want to rewind just for a second and talk about, on our last visit with you, all the way back in episode 107, you talked about support in person through an ABDL support group. You talked about support for plus ones. Can we just rewind for a moment and tell me about that work that you've been doing?
Yeah, we just actually passed our 3-year birthday. So that was in December. So we're right at about 3.5 years of running both support groups. And when I say we, I really just mean me, and then with all the support of the people that support me, like the lovely folks at AV Dealer and my partner. And yeah, so it's been going really well. The in-person support group has been really consistently attended. We haven't had to cancel any for lack of attendance since really, really early on, maybe like the first couple.
Wow.
Still really lively. We've got new faces. We've got faces that have been there before. Lots of new topics, lots of getting updates on how people have been doing since the last month's support group. There've been folks who have met through the support group and have formed kind of their own support outside of support group, which is really always makes my heart so full.
Oh, wow. So that there's like branch support groups branching off of your support group where people are actually meeting outside of your support group as well.
Yeah, where folks are kind of exchanging numbers or contact information after group and being able to support each other on the more day to day. Like we have a Discord for the support groups, but that's mostly for the plus ones. And so there's not a great way for folks for the in-person group to be able to connect with each other other than, sharing contact information and being kind of proactive about that. And they really have been doing that.
Sure. That's and for wonderful. For folks who have never, there are lots of folks who have never met another person with an ABDL kink in their lives, much less attended an in-person support group. But you're doing that at AB Dealer in Denver on the regular. That's amazing.
And I feel really fortunate that, I hear so often that my support group is the first event that ABDLs have come to in the community at all, which feels like such a gift and an honor to be that one bridge between, okay, I've been online and I've seen things that are happening, and oh my gosh, I'm going to actually meet another ABDL in person, and then, oh gosh, I'm going to meet like 10. So...
Yeah, that's such a big step. Yeah, I mean, to take that branching out, to go in person, and to something as potentially intimate as that too. And I'll say this: I've had the fortunate of going to AB Dealer and just being there during some of your support groups in person. I've been to I think 2 or 3 now over the years, and there isn't a single time that I've left that space without tearing up, without just reflecting on my own journey and hearing other stories and feeling inspired to help others and to pass it on. And I know one thing that you've been passionate about is trying to get those support groups into other places around the country, around the world. If anybody out there has an interest, maybe they've been, they have some connections or some place or some ideas that they want to bring this to others, how could they do that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Every time I post about the in-person support group, I get messages that are like, when are you going to do a virtual one for ABDL? And I wish that felt more accessible. I think it's tough because I would have to really cap the amount of people that could come to make sure that everybody gets to be heard and gets the support that they need. So it's been a little bit of a logistical puzzle trying to figure that out, although I'm not saying never on it. But something that I'm really encouraging is folks to be able to start their own support groups in their
Yeah.
own cities, in their own places, just like I did. And, I'll say it's very specifically a peer support group. So even though I am trained in social work, even though that's part of the work that I do in the world, I genuinely believe that you don't have to have that formal training to be able to facilitate a group like this.
Mm.
I'll say that it helps to have some of that kind of emotional intelligence or that bandwidth or the kind of capacity to hold other people's um, thoughts and fears and tenderness, like we were talking about
Mm-hmm,
earlier.
mm-hmm.
Um, but it doesn't necessarily need formal training in any way, right? A peer
Mm.
support group is just that. It's a peer support group. It's allowed to be messy. It's allowed to be awkward sometimes. It's allowed to be imperfect. And I think even when we're hosting things, if we can bring some of that imperfection in, it kind of gives other people permission to
Mm.
be imperfect as well.
Yeah, that's such a good sort of encouragement, because I know I don't have a licensed social work certification like you do, and I might be concerned that I'm not allowed to start a peer support group. And it's really nice to hear that no, it's not therapy, right? We're not claiming that it is. It's just peers getting together to talk about their experiences. And if you have some empathy, and if you have the ability to hold other people's feelings and create a safe space, that's something that I could do if I wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a few, as we were talking about, I've been doing the support group work for 3.5 years for ABDLs, and there's definitely some lessons that I've learned that I think would be helpful for folks wanting to start their own support groups. I think one big thing was I was so fortunate to have the support of ABDler, both emotionally and physically. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
where we meet in their physical space. And that can be really tough figuring out where physically to meet. Sometimes you have accessibility for, if you're lucky and you live near an ABDL store, you can have accessibility there. If you have another kink store or a dungeon, sometimes you can have accessibility there for a room. There's also really, depending on where you live, kind of that possibility for renting a room at a library, for example, right? Not necessarily a space that you can come in with your stuffies and your passies and your onesies in the same way as you might be able to at AB Dealer, for example.
Yeah.
But still a space that's kind of a neutral place, that's soundproof, that you can meet and feel really confident being able to speak honestly and openly about the things that you're wanting support on.
That has never occurred to me. That is such a good idea. I mean, you really could, right? Like, you wouldn't come, as you said, in full little gear, of course, but you can go to a library. You can go to a public space. I wonder how you would distinguish between a peer support group and a munch, because you mentioned that for a lot of folks, a peer support group is the first time they've ever met somebody else. We often say that about a munch, but a munch is a very different animal, and it's a different sort of bar to have to jump over. How do you think about what a peer support group is?
I'll say a peer support group tends to be just a little bit more structured. Something else that I do for my peer support groups is that I start with some group norms that just kind of set the stage for what we're doing and how to be generally respectful of everybody in the space. And then we'll also then move into intros. So it's kind of like sitting around in a circle doing intros kind of thing. Whereas a munch can be a little less structured, kind of coming and going as you please, and more in that public space. So often I find that I have really tender and sometimes even intimate conversations at munches, but they don't always feel like the most comfortable to have, depending on the space that the munch is being held in. Sometimes I think it feels like, oh, who's going to hear me, and can I really share my heart here? And so I think that an important part about the peer support groups is that they're pretty like protected in that way, right? It's a closed door in a lot of ways. Obviously people can come this month and not come next month and then come back, whatever. Not a closed door in that way, but a closed door in that, okay, we are actually behind a door. The only people who are listening right now are the people who are here that I can see. I don't have to worry about my colleague who might also be at this food hall overhearing me talking about something that feels really important and tender to me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I just think back on my own journey, and coming to terms with my ABDL side in my late 20s. how helpful a space like that in my local community would have been. Just to have this space where I can feel safe to come out, maybe not even say a word for an hour, but just listen to other stories, and through exposure, through physically seeing another ABDL in the same room with me, how much that would have helped me get started versus kind of feeling like you're on an island, Yeah. And so I think this is a wonderful call to action for our listeners out there, that you don't need to be a licensed social worker. You don't need to have a physical ABDL store. You can just, have the idea, have the emotional capacity to hold space for others and get them started, and rent a space for an hour in a local library, which most communities are going to have. So I think through what you're discussing here is it makes it more accessible. And I hope that we start seeing a few more of those spaces out there.
Yeah, thank you. I will say that if anybody out there that's listening wants to create a peer support group in their own space and are feeling a little nervous about it, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to jump on a call or message on Instagram. We'll make sure that like all the info is in the show notes about how to contact me. We'll have my website and everything too. So feel free to reach out. I really want this to kind of spread more than just in Denver. So it's a big passion of mine.
That is really generous. And I hope people take you up on it, because everybody who listens to this podcast knows I'm passionate about community, self-love, and people who make stuff. And that is a great way to make stuff, is start this support group in your own community. So I hope people reach out to you. That is really generous.
But I do want to say too, right now in this moment, there aren't those spaces. And so if that option isn't available to those out there, I would love to kind of turn our focus now to some of the other avenues for finding support, whether it's virtual or professionally, with therapists, for example. And I know one big resource that I want to introduce now, that you actually brought to us, that was the inspiration for this episode, is this wonderful workbook that you have created. It's called Unpack and Play, a therapeutic workbook for ABDLs and caregivers. And I would love to just kind of hear, what's your high-level summary of it, and what was your inspiration for it?
Yes, Unpack and Play. I'm so excited to finally be launching this into the world. So basically the high level summary of it is that I have found through my peer support groups, through knowing people in the community, through my own therapeutic work, that so many ABDLs have done that hard work of understanding that this is a part of them, understanding what it might mean to connect with community if they're able to, like working through even the beginning stages of some of that acceptance piece. And then often they're not given the tools or aren't asked the questions to actually understand, and also now that I've kind of started to accept the ABDL umbrella, what does that actually look like in practice for me, right? Like we think about ABDL as kind of a subset of the kink community, which can make it seem small sometimes. But then you look at it and it's this huge umbrella of different identities, different actions, different ways of interacting with people. The ABDLs aren't getting asked the questions of what do you specifically want to do, or how do you specifically want to feel during the scene? Sometimes ABDLs are getting the exposure from Instagram or from their friends. What do you do? How does it work? But sometimes, as we all know, Instagram isn't totally accurate to real life and doesn't ask all of those same questions. So the idea behind the workbook is to give ABDLs and caregivers a space to really work through what does this kink mean to them, in an effort to kind of increase that conversation with yourself, and then also potentially to be able to give you the tools to have that conversation with somebody else, whether it's a caregiver, whether it's a friend, whether it's a play partner or a romantic or sexual partner, to just really give some more of that foundation to be able to understand what this kink means to you and how to connect with other people about it.
Lovely summary. I love that. And one thing you write in there is labels can sometimes be helpful, and sometimes they can make it harder to explore the nuances of your experience or identity. And I think that really is what is a good summary of what I got out of this, doing it myself. Because yes, we're all ABDLs, that most of our listeners are going to be ABDLs or maybe supporters of ABDLs, but what does that mean exactly? I mean, in my own story, I was in a vanilla marriage at some point, and then coming out of that, I was like, okay, I'm ABDL. I'm going to jump into the community, find friends, find partners. If they're an ABDL, then cool, we get along. And then it was only through experience and time that I realized, wait, that's not exactly how it is. I'm ABDL, but that's only like an umbrella label. And even just doing this workbook helped me zero in on like even aspects now where I'm like, oh yeah, I like that. Oh, I don't like that. So, I don't know, RY, if you've had a chance to go through the entire thing, but like it's such a good resource. And I encourage you and listeners out there to go through it themselves if they can get a copy. And we'll talk about how to get a copy of that. But wonderful resource so far.
Yeah, and I am a firm believer that self-love starts with knowledge of self. And in fact, all love, so loving your community, loving your partner, starts with knowledge of self, right? That you have to know and come to terms with who you are in order to love that person. And from that love stems the love for others outside of you, your community, your world. And this workbook is a thorough and, by the way, delightful investigation of yourself. This is not, sometimes, for instance, if you go to therapy, it's like really hard and you leave exhausted. That is not this workbook. When you go through it, you'll see that it really takes you step by step through your own kink, through yourself. Like there's stuff about, where do you like to be touched? Where do you not like to be touched? And what is your DL side like versus your AB side? And it's all like actually really delightful and deeply educational on who you are. Like just going, you don't need another person in the room to do it. You can just go through and say, here's here's a checklist of things that some ABs like. Which things do I like?
Yeah.
Here is a reflection on, do I want to be 24/7 or do I not? And what does that mean to me? Do I like voyeurism or do I not? These are things you may have never considered and certainly haven't written down. This workbook is brilliant because it gives you insight into yourself that then you can use in therapy, in conversations with a partner, in engaging the community. Like it is useful in just about every application in which you might try and spread love.
Yeah. And Marissa, I'm curious, who would you say is the target audience for this resource? Is it ABDLs? Is it couples together? Is it supporters?
First, just saying, y'all got me blushing over here. Thanks so much for all the kind words. And happy that, I spent like a year and a half working on this and was just kind of dreaming about, well, what will it feel like when actually people get it in their hands? And so it's really warms my heart to hear how it feels to actually have it physically in your hands.
Oh, so good.
I'd say the target audience is, you can use it with couples. I think couples could use it just fine. It's not totally set up like explicitly for that. That would just be kind of like doing your each separate sections or each doing your own workbook and then kind of comparing. I've got some things in the works of there might be a couples one or a couples version or chapter or addendum or something coming out at some point. But
awesome.
Yeah, that was definitely on my mind when I was making it. And then I realized that was going to be a whole other project probably. But really for anybody who identifies as an AB, as a DL, as a caregiver, and we'll talk about the chapter breakdown a little bit more later, but it's also set up for folks who identify in a non-sexual way as well as folks who identify in a sexual way. So, and I would suggest it for folks anywhere along your journey. Some folks might have answered some of these questions before. I would hazard a guess, maybe not all of them. And some folks, especially if you're newer in your journey or you're just coming towards that acceptance piece, I think this can be a really incredible way to really parse through the things that you want and need. I actually had a feedback from somebody in support group that said, oh, wow, this list had things on it that I hadn't even thought of doing. And that made me so happy. And also is a great way of like, okay, you're just new in this community or you've been in this community for a while. Like, are there other things that are possible that you haven't thought of? Yeah.
I experienced that. Look, I've been an ABDL as far as I can remember. I've been in the community for 16 years and super active for 16 years. And I found stuff in this book that I'm like, I have never thought about that. Like there's a worksheet about, let me consider my caregiver side. right? A lot of times we focus a lot on the DL side or the AB side, but we don't focus on the caregiver. There's a whole section on my caregiver side, and I got to ask myself questions about my caregiver side. Do I really love 24/7 dynamic, or do I just want it as often as possible, or do I just want it when my partner asks for it, or do I want it only when it's negotiated and time bounded? And how do I think about 24/7? What does it mean to me? Like, these are all questions that I've been in a 24/7 dynamic for years, and I've never asked myself that question. And it is so beneficial to get to go through and go, oh, what do I mean by that?
Right.
Or have I even considered this question before?
It's surprising.
It's amazing. Like, you have hit on sort of so many aspects. I won't say all, but so many aspects that I can't imagine somebody opening this workbook and not finding something new about themselves.
Yeah, and like the use case for me was like, I did the caregiver section. I learned, just like you said, ROI, about myself, about what drives me as a caregiver. What do I like out of, like, what do I want out of this? And then Toki, meanwhile, went through the AB section and, you know, kind of thought about her role and how it meets, you know, her needs. And then at the end, we came together and kind of compared notes and was like, wow, like, we have a lot in common here. Ooh, this was new. This is a new thing that we could probably do together. So to Marissa's point, it's a great individual exercise, but it even also works for couples that want to come together and kind of just see what new avenues could be unlocked, you know, what more things. So there's a lot of different use cases here, I think.
For sure. And I'm curious, Marissa, like, how did you decide to do this? This is a labor of love, obviously, but it's a labor. How did you decide to do this?
It was definitely a long process as I was trying to perfect it and get it to the place that I was happy with it existing in the world. How it came about was that I was running these support groups, and I was, growing in my own therapeutic practice, I'm a sex therapist in my day job. And so getting more clients who are ABDLs and having more in-depth conversations there. And I realized that there weren't really great tools for talking about the things that the workbook talks about. There's lots of different worksheets for different parts of sex therapy or therapy in general. Like, some of the things in here are adapted from them, like yes, no, maybe lists, where you check, yes, I want to do this. No, I don't want to do this. Maybe I want to do this. Let's talk more about it. That kind of thing. So a lot of the pieces in here are adapted from the therapeutic tools that I was starting to get more and more comfortable with at the time that I was thinking about making this workbook. But when I first started, I made like a 7-page worksheet of, here are things that I'm noticing come up in support group, noticing coming up in my own therapy sessions with my clients, that might be helpful questions to ask. And I brought that worksheet into the in-person peer support group and just said, hey, y'all, I would love to talk through this and see if this feels like it might even be a helpful resource, or if there's anything else there needs to be. And the support group participants were so kind and generous with their time and with their effort and with their opinions, and gave me a lot of great feedback on things to incorporate or change or adjust in specific ways. And so I went home and I started integrating all of that feedback. And as I integrated it, it got longer and longer and longer.
I'm sure.
And I kept having more ideas to add and realizing what pieces were really important for me to have and how it needed to be structured. And then I was like, well, holy cow, this is like almost 80 pages now. I don't think it's going to be a worksheet that you can kind of carry around in your pocket anymore.
Yeah. There is no replacement for that. Like, the fact that you have put in the years of connecting, of building wisdom as part of a community, hearing from people with wildly different experiences, having the sort of empathy and open space that you can learn from them. There is no replacement for that. And collecting that in a workbook is amazing, because what it brings the rest of us is not just your wisdom, but it's your wisdom as gained by this entire community that is speaking into it. And I think that's one of the reasons that when I read through the workbook, that I can see myself, and I can see, so many other ABDLs that I know in that workbook, because I think it does reflect the hard work you've put in to get that wisdom from the community.
Also, just plug too, like, some of the wisdom that I'm getting is from Love and Brief too, is from different resources in the community, right? Like, a lot of it too has been these great conversations that I've gotten to listen to on this podcast of what people are bringing into the space. I mean, some of the 24/7 pieces that you were talking about earlier, some of those ideas came from the 24/7 episode that Jan did.
Oh
And
my
so,
gosh, I love it.
yeah,
I
so it's
love
all,
it.
all integrated. It's all, there's only so many resources available in the community. And I mean, there's definitely more and more as they go, but trying to borrow off of everybody and build on top of everybody else's resources together
Yeah.
instead of
Yeah.
having like kind of a competitive, like, no, you have to use my resource, right? I'm
Oh, for
overjoyed
sure.
if people use this resource in addition to the podcast, in addition to therapy, in addition to Dr. Rhoda's book. Like I want it to be part of a big conversation, not just by itself.
Yeah, it even says, I know right at the beginning, like there's like an introduction that says, before we start, and at the sort of last sentence of that section says, this workbook is not a substitute for mental health support, couples therapy, kink community, etc., but can be used in conjunction with these spaces. And I think that is exactly right? Like this is an incredible addition to one's library of support. All the things that we're talking about today, the workbook and beyond.
Yeah, and on that note, I'm curious, how would you be able to, integrate this into a therapy session? So maybe an ABD out there hears about this workbook. What's the next step for them? Should they fill it out? Should they go to their therapist? How does the therapist get, involved in the process?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. This is the thing I'm so excited to talk about. So once the book gets released and I'm kind of over the hump of that book launch, the next thing I'm going to be really focusing a lot of time and energy on is trainings for mental health professionals, where I teach them how to use this workbook within the context of a therapy session or a coaching session or whatever their medium is. And also just give them some information about ABDLs, give them some grounding in what the community is like, what are kind of norms, just general information to feel more comfortable with being able to work with and support the community. And so that's like coming down the pike. And I would definitely suggest, a little selfishly maybe, but definitely suggest that if folks have therapists that they already trust, that they can kind of connect them to my training so that they can feel a little more grounded if they're not as grounded in ABDL. But part of what I'm going to include in that training is that I'm suggesting mental health professionals use 1 or 2 pages for an entire session. And so I think it can be a really good, something that we do in therapy is called bibliotherapy, where like we pick a book out and the client reads a chapter and the clinician reads a chapter, and then the next session we talk about what you took out of the chapter, what felt like it hit home, and what felt like we can build on it given all the other work that we've done. And I think this can be a really helpful tool for bibliotherapy. Something that a piece of feedback that I got from support group when I showed them the full book was, wow, this would be really intimidating to do in one sitting. And I said, oh gosh, please don't do it in one sitting. It's a lot to process.
Oh, I can't imagine. I can't imagine.
Yeah.
It's 81 pages long.
Break.
I cannot, one sitting?
Yeah. And it's a lot of introspection for one sitting too. Like some of these reflection sections might be like your emotional capacity for a couple hours of the day, right? If you really go in depth on it. So I suggest being able to talk with your therapist about the workbook. Maybe even bring it into them when you haven't even filled it out at all and talk about what it might feel like to fill it out. And then see if you can go through it a couple pages at a time together, however much you're comfortable sharing with your therapist. But do these reflection questions and come in and say, hey, therapist, like I reflected on this and here's something that really came up for me. Can we continue to kind of expand on that in the therapeutic space where I can get that more in-depth in-person support?
That is such a good idea.
Yeah. And I love how you're tackling this from both sides of it. The workbook's a great resource for ABDLs to maybe bring up to their therapist. And then you're also, discussing how you can go and help train other therapists out there to prepare them for this moment, when the ABDL comes out. So I think in conjunction, that's just going to help so many people get the support that they need out there.
Yeah. I am curious, when you are encouraging folks to, and we do all the time on this podcast, to go and find a really good therapist, somebody they trust. When you think about how somebody can identify a really good, trustworthy therapist to talk about ABDL with, how do you encourage folks to sort of vet their mental health professional options? because I know you operate in that space and you're saying, hey, I'm willing to train folks, which is amazing. But how do you encourage people to go find a therapist that they can talk about their ABDL kink with?
Wow, that's a great question. Eventually, with my trainings, I will hopefully get a listserv together of folks in lots of different states that have at least done the training and have contact points with me for consultation. So that's also coming down the pike. But until then, and even when that happens too, I think something that can be really helpful is looking for some of those buzzwords that therapists will use. So things like kink aware,
Mm-hmm.
sex positive,
Yep.
things in that space. There's also some really good directories. Kink aware professionals is one of them. You can
Yeah.
find a lot of different inclusive therapists. There's a lot of different directories that are specifically kind of geared towards being more kink aligned, which can be really helpful. And then
Yeah.
I'll also just say that a lot of folks that are in this work will be in some way trained in sex therapy. So whether that's through ASECT, which is the like American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, which has a 2-year kind of rigorous certification process, or whether they've got some sort of sex therapy training in other ways, most of these programs will have some amount of content that's related to kink, that's related to different kinds of sexuality. And so that also gives you kind of it's not a perfect science, like nothing really is, but it gives you a little bit more of a vote of confidence that, oh, this therapist might have some familiarity with what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Those are all really good sort of, as you said, buzzwords to look for: sex positive, kink aware, people who in fact are on these lists. And we'll put it in the show notes as well. But if people are looking for the Kink Aware Professionals Network, that is at kapprofessionals.org. That list is maintained by the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom. And just a heads up, I have not vetted every single person on that list. I couldn't possibly. So you have to find the professional that's right for you. Go with your gut. If you get into a session and you're like, something, this isn't working for me, it's okay to move on. It's the same thing I tell people about, partners. There's plenty of people that you could connect with. Don't feel like you have to go with the first person that you meet if you're not connecting the way that you want to.
And do you happen to have any advice around, let's say you find the therapist that you believe is going to be a good resource for you. How do you bring up ABDL? Like in the first session, in the second session, is there a certain process, as you're getting clients that, are coming to you? Is there a way that you want them to bring it up? Love some advice around that, because that's something I've heard a lot from my friends, even in my own experience. How do you broach that subject,
Yeah, so I'll say even before the first session, right, when you're just trying to figure out what therapist is right for you, I always suggest people have 2 or 3 consultations. Most therapists will do free 15, 20-minute consultations so you can get a feel for who that person really is off the paper, right? Lots of people can say lots of things on paper, but being kind of in person, whether it's virtual, in person, on the phone, can be a really helpful way to vet somebody. And I'll really suggest in those conversations you don't necessarily have to say specifically what your kink is, but saying something to the effect of, hey, it's really important that my therapist is able to hold all of the parts of my identities. And some of those parts are my kinky identities. How comfortable are you with kinks? And even if they say, wow, yes, I'm super comfortable, you're allowed to ask follow-up questions. How comfortable are you with kinks that are not as like quote unquote mainstream kinks, right? How comfortable are you with talking about specific parts? Maybe your dynamic is 24/7. Maybe your dynamic also includes other kinks as well. Like you can bring those things up in those consultations and see who feels right in those spaces.
Yeah. That's such great advice. I didn't even think about sort of the 15-minute phone call or consultation. But you're right. Like if you test the waters and you're getting a feel from them that they're avoiding, or they really don't have the knowledge base to get into that discussion in a way that you're comfortable with, what a great way to vet a potential therapist relationship.
Yeah. And then in that first couple of sessions too, for me as the therapist, I will generally bring up sex life, things that you want to focus on. Often I like to say, okay, you came in, here are the like main things that you came in wanting to work on. Let's call those the main dishes. Like, are there any side dishes that are important for me to know as we're going into our work together? Because I want to know I want all of you to be welcome in this space, right? Some folks who are ABDLs come to therapy to talk specifically about ABDL. And some folks who are ABDLs come to therapy to talk about something entirely different. But ABDL is a part of their life, or a supportive factor, or maybe an anxiety producer, or maybe all of those things. And those are important things for them to bring into their therapy as well, right? If you're talking about, oh, how do you find comfort in your life with your therapist, and there's this whole section of your life that you don't feel like you can talk to them about, that really can affect the way that your therapist can connect with you. And of course, I want you to do that in a way that feels safe for you. And I think it's so nice when we can bring just our full selves into the room with our therapists.
Yeah, I think that's a big deal. And imagine going to your primary care physician and being like, you can check everything but my blood pressure. Like you're allowed to see how tall I am and how much I weigh, but in my temperature, but you're not allowed to know my blood pressure. Well, like that blood is like coursing through literally every part of your body and super relevant to every other thing that they're doing. And if you don't let your primary care physician check your blood pressure, like they may be missing an important clue to why everything else is happening. So it's not that ABDL has to be the center of your therapeutic relationship, but as you said, it might be a meaningful main dish and it might be a side dish. And for me, when I started my therapeutic relationship with my therapist, it started out as a main dish. And then as I did the work of like reconciling my kink and becoming more comfortable and falling in love with who I am as an ABDL, it actually became a side dish. And it rarely comes up now. But it's important to know because it can be a stressor and it can be a delighter and it can be a thing that actually helps me in my therapy. So yeah, I do encourage folks, find a therapist you trust and let them in when the time is right. Like don't hold back on that part, because I bet if they are the kind of therapist that I hope that they are, that they would actually welcome that information as part of your total package.
Yeah, and it encourages me that there are people out there like Marissa that are working to put together resources to help aid in that process, to find therapists that we know are safe, that are informed.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be that your therapist is an ABDL expert or even knows what it is. It may be somebody that just is, again, really experienced and wonderfully empathic and they want to learn. Great. Send them to Marissa and they can get a little crash course. Bring them Dr. Rhoda's book or books, whatever it takes. It's not that your therapist has to be an expert or you should walk away, but it needs to be somebody who is open and willing to learn this side of you.
Yeah, Marissa, exactly. And something I say to therapists a lot is like in that first session when your client tells you something that's so tender and such a big part of themselves, you have two options. You can be cool or you can be harmful. And I want to empower you to be able to be cool, right? In that first session, your therapist actually doesn't need to know a whole lot about ABDL in order to meet you there. They just have to know all of their normal therapy questions. What does that mean to you? When did this first become something that was important to you in your life? What does community look like, right? Even those three questions can be damn near a full session, right? And then after the session ends, they can go on FetLife or reach out to me for a consultation or do some of their reading themselves, right? They don't need to be like you said, the foremost expert in ABDL. But if you've done the vetting and you've gotten the good rapport with your therapist to know that they're open and accepting and have that unconditional positive regard that we hope all therapists will have for their clients, then that's great. They won't be harmful, hopefully, in that first session, and then they'll be able to educate themselves, right? It's not your job to educate them on ABDL, but it is your job if they're working with you and supportive of you to educate them on what ABDL looks like for you specifically.
Yeah, I think this is a wonderful discussion because I hear oftentimes the general advice is go find a therapist. And I think that's still lovely advice, but being able to dive into the details here about, well, which type of therapist, what are the attributes that you look for, what are maybe some of the red flags to watch out for, and then how do you then broach the topic and find meaningful support. I think this is the first time that I've really heard that discussion in that level of detail. So thank you for bringing that to us here.
Yeah, for sure.
And this is the big part of why I'm specializing in this area is that I've heard from folks that I know in the ABDL community, folks that are my clients now, that there's been some harm perpetuated by other therapists that they've had. And so I'm not here trying to say every therapist is going to be a perfect fit for you or no therapist is going to cause harm. There's unfortunately a lot of misinformed or uninformed therapists that can unintentionally or intentionally cause a lot of harm. And so I think it's a really important discussion to think about, okay, like you are also in control of this process. You are the client too. You get a say. And so you get to decide what therapist feels the safest and most comfortable for you. And maybe that looks like it's an in-person therapist, or if you don't have an in-person therapist that meets those criteria, maybe it looks like doing virtual therapy for a while with being able to cast a little bit wider of a net.
Yeah. Is there a red flag that you would call out when a therapist says something like ... that maybe they're not the right therapist to help you with your ABDL discussion?
I think there's some like ones that I've heard that are pretty blatant red flags, right? So I've heard of clinicians saying things about kink being harmful or kind of stigmatizing ABDL participation and saying, well, you have to choose between continuing with me or continuing with your kink, which is, gosh, I hope nobody ever has to hear that, because I mean, my heart hurts to even say it.
That is such an easy decision for me.
Like,
I can't not have this, so bye. That's the answer to that one. But I understand when you're in a therapeutic relationship, it runs deeper.
And then I'll say too, like something else that at least when I've heard it feels like a red flag for me, everybody gets to decide if that feels like it for them, is that sometimes people come in, like we said, with ABDL as a side dish, and the therapist will just like keep bringing it in as a main dish. And that goes back to like listening to your client and what they need, right? If you want to feel listened to and you say, actually, this is like a part of my life, but it's not something that I'm feeling distressed about. It's not something that I'm needing additional support on. And then you start talking about your anxiety and your therapist is like, well, it might be the ABDL thing that's causing your anxiety, right? And you're like, okay, well, that's not actually my theory of it. And it's actually something that helps my anxiety or lessens my anxiety, right? So I think those important pieces about really listening to you and what you're coming in with, and not making assumptions on what your kink means just by the name or by associations they may have before they met you.
That's so good. I had a therapist briefly. So when I was like trying to find the right therapist who did exactly that, they'd never heard of it, which is fine, but they were so intrigued by it that they assumed A, that's all I wanted to talk about, and B, that this was the source of my needs. And it wasn't. Like, I had already started to come to terms with it. I didn't need to talk about ABDL, but every time that I would go in, they would, want to talk about, well, how does this connect to your ABDL kink? I think it's just that they had never seen it and were like, wow, which is not what you want. You don't want a therapist who's like, holy shit, what? So I moved on, and I will reiterate, like, one way that a therapist can unintentionally cause harm is in that way, which is that they become convinced that this is your pathology, right? But ABDL is not a pathology. It is a part of you that is can be magnificent and life-giving. It's not an illness. It's not a thing to be fixed. And if your therapist is like, oh, I can help you get rid of that, to me, that's a big red flag.
Big red flag, yeah. And going back to the workbook, I mean, now that this resource is going to be out there, now you can kind of go into that session knowing what ABDL means to you in a more specific sense, and you can communicate that to your therapist. And that way, they can kind of gauge, I imagine, how big of a part. Is it the main dish? Is it the side dish? So just from all of the kind of tying this all together, I mean, there's all these great resources out there that people like Marissa are putting together. And I'm so hopeful in this moment, of what the future can look like for mental health support for ABDLs, for their own self-love journey, and having support there, whether it be another person or just their workbook or friends or partners. I think there's a lot more resources now than there ever have been before. And I see it kind of like this positive feedback loop that just keeps feeding and feeding on itself. We mentioned, how Love and Brief was maybe an inspiration for some of this workbook and some of the work that Marissa has done. I hope that the words that we're, the discussions we're having today are going to have that effect for others that are out there listening. And this just kind of becomes a bigger and bigger snowball where people, no matter where they are, can have some option to find that self-love that they deserve to have.
Yeah. The concept of the snowball in the community is so good because it really does work that way. And the more that we put out into the world, the more that other folks get inspired, whether it's a podcast or, a book like this, the more that other folks go, well, here's how I contribute my part of it. And I remember, when we were doing the live show at CAP this year, and we had this amazing discussion about a Spanish language podcast, right? And it was so good. And that podcast is launched. I'll put it in the show notes. But that's another example of how do we inspire others to go make something great, and how will they inspire? So maybe they could be a Spanish language version of this workbook, so that it is expanding and growing, and support is becoming more ubiquitous. The trick, friends, is you have to actually choose to engage it.
Yes.
And you won't hear me say this on this podcast very often. We're not sponsored. I don't tell people to go buy one thing or another. Just go get this workbook. It's really great. Don't worry. Nobody's paying me to say it. Yeah. I just think it's really great. There is so much value to the insight that you get on yourself that will pay off in every other part of your ABDL journey. Just go get the workbook. Just do it. Do it with your therapist. Do it with a friend. Do it by yourself. Block some time to just go through, 10 minutes a week and do one page. It doesn't matter. Take the time to get this insight on yourself. I don't care if you've been doing this for 6 months or for 16 years like I have been. Mm-hmm. It is worth it. I promise.
Yeah, everyone will get something out of it. I guarantee it. So we've hyped this up enough. Marissa, where can folks find this workbook? And tell us anything else that you would like to share about it.
So the official launch day where it's going to be released into the world is May 30th. That'll be a big launch party at AB Dealer. If you're local and you want to come by, I'll be signing books, which feels like a wild thing to say. But I'll be signing them if people want them signed. And that's when they'll kind of launch officially, but we'll have pre-orders open until then. So if you're listening to this right around when it comes out, you've got a couple weeks to get a pre-order in, whether you're in Denver, whether you're outside of Denver. We'll ship them on the 30th or as close to the 30th as we can. And then at some point, hopefully before the launch date, but we'll see, about at the launch date, I'm also working on some digital downloads. So if you prefer to have it in digital form, it'll be a fillable PDF that will actually be broken up into specific sections. So if you're just in the non-sexual AB category and you don't want all of the other sections of the book, you'll be able to just download that section and use that as your resource. So it'll be smaller chunks that'll be priced a little lower, but also let you kind of pick and choose which chunks are the best ones for you. And then, like we said before, my website will be in the show notes, and that'll be probably the best way to find out what physical locations you might be able to get them in, what online locations you might be able to get them in. I'll be working on getting it into more kink stores, more ABDL stores. So hopefully you'll be seeing it pop up here and there. But hopefully it'll be kind of in the space that's closest to you. I'll also say with this that, and I promise I'm not just saying this to sell more workbooks, but I do think that this can also be a helpful tool to fill out, this year, and then fill out in a year, in 6 months, in 2 years, in 5 years, right? And the digital downloads can be really helpful for that. But I know part of the way that this is designed is specifically so that you have kind of this physical, it almost looks like a coloring book on some pages. So I do really like that physical feel. But digital downloads, of course, you can fill them out multiple times. If you buy the physical copy, feel free to copy pages and use them multiple times. I'll ask that if you're doing either one of those things, that you're not just, buying it and sharing it with all of your friends, so that it keeps the money in the community. But please feel free to let other folks know about if this was helpful for you or different pages that were helpful for you. But I want it to be as accessible as possible and also give you those touch points, right? Maybe how you fill it out today is way different from how you'd fill it out, even tomorrow, but 2 years from now, a year from now, as you grow and change in your ABDL identity or your caregiver identity.
That's a great reminder. Our kink experience is not a static thing. Things will shift over time as we meet new people, have new experiences. And I love that call to action of, hey, maybe fill it out now and then come back to it, revisit in a year and see how things are changing.
Yep.
And one more thing I want to point out too is in the very end of the book, there are some great other resources. So again, our discussions today are, how do you seek support as an ABDL? We've discussed many of those, the peer support groups that we're hoping we can expand upon, get out there into more local areas, professional therapists, this workbook itself, but in the back here, there's other books too, like Dr. Rhoda's You're Not Broken. And that was, if you want to listen to that on our podcast, I think it was episode 86, way back in the day. We had Dr. Rhoda on to discuss that. And then some of the other podcasts that have inspired this workbook too. And, we've had some crossover episodes this year. We had, one of the hosts from the Crinkle Club on there. Yep. In the Nook, we did that great crossover. And then some of the more legacy podcasts, like the Big Little Podcast by Mako and Spacey, wonderful resource that'll be there. And Dream a Little by Low back in the day. So, from the humble beginnings of ABDL podcast to where we are now and where we're going, again, more and more resources are out there. And in the back of this book, there's just a whole list of those that can inspire people to kind of branch out even further.
For sure. And if you just want to have a really wicked good time, The Usual Bet is a really fun podcast as well.
Good call.
You might get some advice from it, but you're definitely going to have a good time.
It's a fun time.
Every time. Yeah.
Marissa, I have one more question for you. And it strikes me that you have a very unique perspective of the community. And I'm just curious, what do you see, what do you hope to see come out of the community in the next, say, 5 years? Like where we are right now to where, in the world and where it is, where do you hope that we are as a community, given your perspective in the next 5 years?
And obviously, I'm a little biased on this answer, but something that I really hope for the community is that the support really deepens in the community. I think there's already such good support out there, but being able to go to any kind of Psychology Today website and find like 5 therapists who are listing ABDL in their bios, right, would be incredible. Like that's my dream, is that folks get to get out under the kind of thumb of shame and guilt that so often is present in this kink, and be able to really like live into, what does this kink mean to me? How can I not only like grow within myself in this kink, but grow within community and support other folks and meet some other incredible folks, right? This is the kind of support that we see happening at CapCon, but it can happen in much broader spaces, and CAP is wildly just a small subset of the ABDLs, right? Every time I go to CAP, I'm so overwhelmed by how many people are there. And I know that it's just a small subset of how many people there are in the world that want and need that support too. So my hope is, I'm really hoping that there's lots more peer support groups that happen in other places, but that there's more mental health professionals that are aware and supportive, that there's more communities that are forming in small ways, right? Especially how tough the world can be right now. A lot of where I'm finding hope is coming back into community, right? When the big world feels so hopeless and lost and like things are really going off the track, I always come back to community, whether that's mutual aid, whether that's, it sounds silly that throwing a party is mutual aid, but that's connection, right? Like this person is connecting with this person, and this person has a lawnmower and this person has a lawn that needs mowed, and they can connect and build that network of support that if things get more dire or if we need to have different ways to support each other, we're already building those really rich networks. So I'm always going back to that like community level support, that individual level support that then knits together to form these like bigger quilts of support.
Yep. And the need is so there. Like if you are the person who says, you know what, I'm going to take Marissa up on this offer to learn how to start my own local peer support group, I think you will find that like you're not spending a lot of weeks sitting there waiting for people to show up. Sure, the first few, it might take a little bit of time to ramp up, but the need is there. And whether it's the kink and ABDL aware therapist, or whether it's the local peer support group, like you are needed, and the need is there for support in every community. I've yet to find the upper threshold of like how much stuff we can make for the ABDL community.
The more,
like
the
there's
better.
so many of us out there. The more, the better. This is not a limited resource scenario. So I'm right there with you, Marissa. I want to see that support. I want to see it in all kinds of ways. Yeah. And I really do hope you, the listener, who right now are thinking, I wonder if that's me. I wonder if I'm the one. You know, I have a lot of empathy. I have a lot of desire to help others. I wonder if I'm the one who should contact Marissa and start my own peer support group. The answer is yes. If you're at that stage already, if you're thinking about it, the answer is yes. You're the person. I promise.
Yeah. Right.
I should also, just real quick, because I don't want to miss it, but I want to, boy, our show notes are going to get out of hand on this one,
yes,
Teddy. We're going to have to.
Very long.
Yeah, it's going to be a long show notes.
Encyclopedia.
But, for sure. But I'll mention the Spanish language podcast I was talking about before that came up during CAP is called, it's launched and I've listened and it's wonderful. It's called Entre Cambios Hablamos, or Between Changes We Talk.
Love that.
Hosted by Dorothy Mice. Yeah, it's really, really great. I've super enjoyed the first episode. It is in Spanish, so if you don't speak Spanish, it may not be the right podcast for you. But if you do speak Spanish, it's wonderful. Also, I should mention Dr. Rhoda, yes, on episode 86, talked about her book, You're Not Broken, which is one of the first things I recommend to anybody who's like, how do I learn about myself?
Yeah.
Great start. That book. But she also was on episodes 27, episode 40, and a CAP panel episode. She gives fantastic advice as well. And she's authored another book about getting over shame in your sexual self. It's not ABDL specific. And I believe it's called No More Hiding. So that's another
great calls.
Another resource. Yeah. But this you heard me say before, I'll say it again. This workbook is worth just get it. Whether you get it digitally, I like the print format so that I can fill it out by hand because I find that really engages me. But just get the workbook; it's so worth it.
And just it's so encouraging how week after week, month after month, there's more and more resources available to ABDLs out there. Like this is the best time there's ever been to be an ABDL, even if the grander world doesn't really reflect that. I think within our community, the resources that we have, the people that are out there paying it forward, to help others, is just so inspiring.
Yep. And I want to see those makers continue to emerge in the community. Yeah. Marissa, you have been such an incredible resource and such an incredible gift to the community. The way that you have just continued to create support, to bring your many years of expertise and training to the community. I'm so grateful that you chose to bring all of those gifts and that work to the rest of the community. And I'm so grateful that you chose to come and talk about it with us here on Love and Brief. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much. And I will also just echo something that you said earlier of just keep at it. If you're trying to build community in your local spaces, keep at it. Like the +1 support group, we passed, 2.5 years of kind of difficult, maybe slower meetings, maybe less attended meetings. And now we've just started to have a really solid crew, 4 or 5 people who are coming back every month. And it's the thing that I started the support group to build, but it took some time to build. And sometimes that's how community works, right? So sometimes it really relies on all of your other supports in your life to say, yes, you're doing this thing and it's worth it and it's hard right now, but it's worth it and it's going to pay off, or it won't. But the payoff is still going to be that you created something, that you reached out to community. Even just having that one conversation with that one person is worth it. I'll just echo that. Stick with it. Sometimes it can be harder than other times. There might be less attendance or less interest, but it'll come.
Yes.
Beautiful.
When folks reach out to me and ask, how can I start my own ABDL podcast? I always tell them, make 12. Just out of the gate, make 12. Because the first time you launch it and you put it out on a Sunday morning or a Tuesday afternoon, and then Wednesday comes and you have had 0 listens. And then Friday comes and you've had 0 listens, and then you had 1 listen. And then you're brave enough that you put out episode 2 and you get 1 thumbs up on social media or whatever. Like, it's so disheartening. Make 12. Just like you're saying with the group, like, keep at it and it will happen. It just takes time. And I hope that folks who are thinking about starting their own local community group, their peer support group, whatever, are willing to be like, I'm just going to do 12. If after 12, I don't want to do it anymore, fine. But I'm just going to do 12.
Yeah.
And I hope those folks step up.
And they aren't alone in that. They have support out there from people like Marissa that can help them, guide them in their own experiences. And wow, ROA. I just want to say, what a great summary of today's discussion. All these different areas of support that are out there. And whether you're listening to this episode as your first ever foray into anything ABDL, or you're a seasoned veteran, here for 20 years, I think there are some resources out there for folks. So glad we can get this out there into the ether and help, inspire somebody to take it to the next step.
Me too. And by the way, we have not paid enough attention to this. We mentioned the title real quick at the beginning. The title of this workbook is brilliant, which is Unpack and Play, which is the order in which it works, right? You figure yourself out, and then you get to enjoy your ABDL experience so much more. Unpack and Play, a therapeutic workbook for ABDLs and caregivers. And we, of course, will link to that resource and to Marissa in the show notes. But Marissa, I wonder if you could just one more time for folks who are getting ready to sign off, the best way to get a hold of you, get a hold of this book.
Yeah. So just quick shout out to my incredible partner for coming up with the name of that. I was definitely stumped on it and was happy to have the support there. Right. It's all about support at the end of the day. The way that you can reach me, my kink Instagram is ABDealing, so ABDEALING. You can reach me there. My therapeutic website is copaceticcounseling.com, so COPESETICCOUNSELING. That'll be where you can see some of my therapeutic offerings, but there'll be a whole section for Unpack and Play as well. And that's where the digital downloads will live at some point. So those are kind of the best two ways to get in contact with me. I'll be checking messages there. There's a website, an email address that's linked to that website that you'll find on the contact page there. That'll be a way that you can contact me as well.
I think this is also the first time I will ever have spelled copacetic correctly. So thank you for spelling it out for me. I don't think I've ever spelled that correctly on my first try.
To be fair, this is one of two ways to spell it, but this is the way that is in line with my last name. So it's the way I...
It's so clever. I saw that in the workbook. I was like, that's the perfect name for your practice. I love it.
Yep. Marissa Copacetic. I love it. Teddy, anything else we want to talk to? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Marissa.
Copacetic is kind of this idea of like everything's groovy, like everything's just even keel, kind of like we're doing all right. It's a word that doesn't get used all that often anymore, but that's kind of the double entendre, I guess, of it is my last name, and also like things are going to be okay.
That's also a very Denver vibe, and I dig that about you. And hanging out with you, I totally experienced that as well. For what it's worth, it's like everything's fine, everything's groovy. You just totally exude that vibe, and I love it. Teddy, anything else we should cover today before we sign off?
I think that about wraps it up, RY. I don't know. This was a wonderful discussion.
Absolutely. And Marissa, thank you again for coming to talk about it. This has been such a pleasure. Friends, I hope that you, in whatever way you deem is right, find the support that you want, whether it be community, whether it be therapy, whether it be self-support by using the workbook, whatever you need. I hope you pursue it and get it. And I'm just so thrilled that there are even more resources today than there have ever been. This stuff wasn't around 16 years ago when I started in the community, and it certainly wasn't around when I was growing up. So I really hope you take advantage. If you want to contact us, you can reach out to loveandbrief@gmail.com. You can maybe suggest show ideas. You can ask questions that we'll cover in a question roundup or topics that you'd like to hear. You can also reach out to us on Instagram. It's Love in Brief Podcast on Instagram. No, just Love and Brief on Instagram.
At Love and Brief. Yep.
At Love and Brief. Thank you. Yep. You can tell Teddy set that one up because I'm like, what's our name again? Also on FetLife, we're really active in the Love in Brief podcast group.
Great discussion group. Love it.
Really great discussion group, active discussion group. I always say those are my peeps because they feel like home base to me. And of course, you can reach out to me, Resident Yes, on the socials. And Teddy.
Yeah, I'm Teddy Bear with me. Teddy Bear with me. No special dashes, dots, whatever on FetLife, and then Teddy Bear _ with me on Instagram. I do post those travel pictures and stuff on Instagram only. So if you give me a follow, maybe I can help inspire you for your own trips. And I actually love helping people travel, make travel plans. That's one way of me passing it on to help others feel inspired.
Oh my gosh,
would love to. So just reach out.
So worth it. like there's a picture of mountains, and then there's Teddy's pictures of mountains, and they are we've all seen what a mountain looks like, but when Teddy takes a picture of a mountain or a field or a sunset, it is just next level special. So highly encourage follow.
I second.
Oh,
Yep.
Well, the world's beautiful. World's a beautiful place, and it's a pleasure to just capture a part of it.
Oh, it's so good. Friends, I hope you get all the support that you want and need. And remember to put your oxygen mask on first. Take care of yourself. Get that insight into self. Get the support you need. And then turn around, as we are doing on this podcast, and try to offer that support back to the rest of the world. It will fulfill you time and time again, I promise. This has been another magnificent edition, I think, of Love in Brief.